Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Welcome to the double game week 36 pod of the FPL Wire. Just 3 game weeks to go. I'm your host, Zophar, my co-host, Lateriser, and I are joined by our friend, Pras. How's it going, buddy?
It's going all right. After two game weeks of taking beatings of McAllister, here we are, back here. I mean, we were talking about it before this started, right? I mean, I think a lot of us are ready for the end now, so. But otherwise, all good. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. You know what that McAllister goal reminded me of? About 2 or 3 seasons ago, something similar happened to Raheem Sterling. He was just inevitable, and it was during COVID season. And he somehow wobbled upon the goal, and then he fell, and his miscue or miscontrol landed on his head, and that ball went into the goal. He was my captain at that time, so I enjoyed it.
It was against Brighton.
Yeah,
I remember
it was against Brighton. Yeah, it was very amusing. But yeah, pretty much, I think, on the beach from an FPL perspective, but things are getting a little nervous from a Manchester United perspective. I'm not feeling confident about the end of the season. How about you, Zoph?
Doing good. Maybe
Your
you.
team is
Yeah,
in control of.
of everything. And apparently, we are in control of the title race, the top four, and the relegation battle. I think I should mail my Lampard poster to you.
Yeah. I'm just hoping that he's a fan of Ten Hag or something of that sort, because that game is the game I'm worried about. I don't want to go into the last game, especially with the Fulham. They caused City and Liverpool, both of them, some problems. It wasn't easy going. I don't want to go, especially with Metro back. I don't want to be going to that last home game wanting 3 points. I don't feel good about it.
Yep. I'm confident about Forest, but the games after playing the teams the top five,
Yeah.
top four, not so much.
It's a good opportunity to pledge to Marco. Marco, just make sure that you play your most terrible team in Game Week 38. Win the next 3 games, that's fine. But in 38, just do the thing. Do us a favor as a patron of the FPL Wire. We're requesting you to do this for us.
Play the youngsters. Look out for the next season.
Yeah.
In terms of the game week gone by, very meh. I think mid 30s all around.
Yeah. I mean, the one punt I took was Alvarez, and him and Haaland together combined should have had 30 points. I don't know how that didn't happen in the game that we just saw, but that's the game we play.
If Haaland had also got a hat trick, right, we'd be sitting on 65, but still with a red arrow. It's pretty much the same thing. So,
yeah, but I'll tell you what, a 65-point red arrow still feels better than a 35-point slide
That's a
green.
fun-
35 is a slap in the face. Like all your picks are rubbish, and here you are, basically.
Yeah. 35 is when you're questioning life, like this game that we spend like so many hours, and then we can't even cross 40. Like that's the slap in the face that we're talking about.
Truly. Should we get started then? Look forward.
Let's go for it.
Let's go.
Good.
All data you see on the FPL Wire is taken from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. The new improved members area is now up and running, and the new comparison tool lets you compare key stats for up to 3 players. Player projections are also live, and as always, you can access the custom stats table we create or make one for yourself. Sign up for membership today using our affiliate link in the description below. Right. Let's get started with the Brighton mid discussion first. For those of you guys who missed it, Solly March came on as a substitute and then went off injured with a hamstring injury last week, and I don't think he is going to be featuring again this season. So Pras sent us this image here earlier. This is NP-XGI of all mids under 7 million, Pras, since the restart.
Under 7 million, yeah.
So for the audio guide, I'll just read out a quicker ones. You have McAllister right at the top with 0.61. Then it's basically the Arsenal mids and Mitoma. So that's where we are. And let me ask you guys just first quick question. Is it just a simple swap to McAllister? Pras?
It's never a simple swap to McAllister. Look, the data here, as soon as you look at this, since the restart, it would, and this is non-pen by the way, would say just go for McAllister. But we're getting to end zone time, and when we'll come to our benches, we'll see that people are having an excellent bench. So it's not as simple, because you could maybe say, I don't want triple Brighton this week. Maybe I just want double Brighton this week, and I could punt for somebody else. Could be an Arsenal player, could be a Man City player who is benched this week but plays in the double. But Pranal, you have something to say.
Yeah, you can do that. It's just there's first things first. There's nothing wrong with going McAllister. Like despite him playing slightly deeper, even if he's playing deeper, he's going to get some minutes further up. He's still in and around the box. He still has that tends to arrive. Like outside of the goals that he scored in the last 2 games, to be fair to him, he had 2 good shots where he could have scored from those shots as well. So it's not like he's just an absolute fluke. He's a decent pick who's slightly overperforming, and a perfectly fine pick for the next 2 game weeks, in my opinion. Because penalties count. Brighton have players who are capable of winning penalties. I think the best pick actually, as the third Brighton, is unfortunately classified as a forward. Because I think Enciso is likeliest to get most minutes with the absence of March in the front four because of his versatility. He can play on either side of the wing. He can play 10. And I think he looks good. He's very direct. So this points potential for a pick like that is very high. But the problem is he's a forward. And if you're spending a transfer on a forward this week, it's likely going to be one of the Newcastle boys. So that's the sort of dilemma in my head. So you go for McAllister. The FPL boys talked up, Pascal Gross for the chasers. Now you don't mind it because I was reading Tom Freeman's article also and his statistics. I think since the World Cup, post World Cup restart, he's fourth for chances created and XA. So he's got underlying numbers. And if you think about Brighton from a tactical point of view, all the creativity that came from the right hand side was a combination of March and Pascal Gross. Now, I think if the balls are coming in from the right hand side, I don't think Enciso is as much of a crosser of the ball as Solly March is. So maybe the responsibility on Gross's shoulders to put the balls in the box when the play is getting built from the right hand side slightly increases. He's generally a good player. There's a punt, but on paper, still Mac is a better pick. And then the one thing in your head, sorry, I'm going on a slight monologue, but the one thing in your head is Brighton's schedule is tricky. Like they've got 3 days off, 2 days off, 3 days off, 2 days off. And they look exhausted. They look done. Like conceding 5 goals to an Everton team. I mean, that's just an absolute shock result. So you say, you know what, these teams are looking like they're on the ropes. They don't have much on them at the moment. And there are a few single game week, non-double game week playing teams that just have really good picks. Like, if you don't have a Liverpool midfielder, they're going to play Leicester after a 9-day gap. There's Arsenal, who are looking absolutely on it and have good fixtures. And then there is Crystal Palace, who I think from a fixture perspective have got like 3 of the easiest, most likely open games. You're talking about Bournemouth at home, Fulham away, and then Forest at home. Like if you want to punt on an essay, I actually think Wilfred Zaha is my gut feeling sort of punt towards the end of the season. You go there. I don't mind it. Like I think that sort of tiredness towards the end of the season sort of makes up for this. And I'm not saying you don't get a third Brighton pick. Maybe you ignore or see what happens with March and maybe get a forward in the next game week when you're trying to balance out the books. That's where I am.
Before I come to you, Pras, I'm just going to walk the guys through the schedule now. Brighton play Arsenal on Sunday, Newcastle on the Thursday, which is fine. But right after that is where the gaps get scary. There's 2 days now to Southampton and then only 2 days to Man City, then 3 days to Villa after. So that 3 game period, Newcastle, Southampton, Man City, is when it does get tricky. Right? Your thoughts, Pras?
And especially when the team has so much accumulated fatigue anyway.
Correct. Your thoughts, Pras?
I mean, this is the thing. That, I mean, you talk about, it's all linked. So it's all linked about how many Newcastle you have, if you have Mitoma or McAllister already as your other Brighton midfielder. And so why I say it's linked is a lot of people don't have a Newcastle forward and they do, and now they have March. So I'm in that position. I think Zoph, you're in that position. You could easily look at an Enciso in that forward position and punt a Newcastle midfielder. And that also actually gives you funds to take that Newcastle midfielder to a City midfielder. So basically just walking through, let's say March and Watkins becomes Enciso and Saint Maximan or Joe Linton. We'll talk about Newcastle in a second. And then you take that Joe Linton spot to a Mahrez spot in the City double in Game Week 37. And then you take that same spot into a Saka in Game Week 38. So there are routes that you can take in that position because the rest of the team looks fairly okay. I mean, obviously injuries aside. You could go there. But my thinking is, given the stats that I'm looking at for McAllister, 4 games. I mean, McNeil could have 4 games and I would still go there. I mean, that's just, I mean, maybe we're suckers. But,
5 games.
I get your counter. It's Man City, Arsenal away, and Newcastle away. That's as tough as it gets in terms of the 4 games.
Yeah. Just to be fair, though, to be fair to the brand of football that Brighton are playing, I don't think, we discussed this a few pods ago, fixture difficulty for a team like Brighton matters as much as it might for other teams. Because I think they're still going to play the kind of football and the brand of football that they've been playing. They're not going to show respect to the 2 opponents that they're going to face in the next 2 games. So I think that's also a factor if you want to go for Brighton attacker. In my head, if you don't own Mitoma, I think March to Mitoma is as straightforward as it gets. I think Mitoma non-owners have been getting fairly lucky in the last 3, 4, 5 weeks. I think that's a move you take. It's a no-brainer in my head. Mac, you think? Because I don't mind the move to a single game weeker. And I think you also have, there's also territory to sort of weigh up whether you are picking somebody with 3 games. Like United has a good fixture this week and they've got a double next week. Zoph's team, if somebody wants to get a little creative, is playing Forest at home. On paper, it's a great fixture, and then they've got a tough double next week. But you could decide that. But I just think Arsenal, Liverpool, Palace. If you're going single game weeks, those are the ones I'm feeling.
I think Arsenal. I'd
Yeah.
put Arsenal right at the top of the list. Martinelli or Odegaard. I think if you can go there, I'd probably prioritize them over McAllister now. But 5 games, right, in 3 game weeks is a lot. And ultimately, I think in the minutes, what's helped is also Billy Gilmore now playing has meant that it's not all of the time that McAllister has to play deeper. There's one more option in midfield also that McAllister can play further forward.
But what do you think? Just if you're tabulating the number of games, if I'm looking at, let's say, the Arsenal picks and Liverpool picks, 3 games are actually 3 games. Like when I'm looking at picks for Brighton, maybe outside of McAllister, I think 5 games is actually 4 games or 3.5 games.
Correct.
It isn't 4 games. McAllister is probably the likeliest to play 5 games, but it just isn't a very convincing case for him. That's all.
I completely agree with you there.
Yeah.
And the risk is they miss Southampton. I mean, the game in which Mitoma and McAllister both sat out was the Wolves at home. Basically the 6-0, right? So there's nothing to say that it's again the game in which they're rested, or basically they need a break, is the non-difficult game, which is non-Man City, non-Arsenal, non-Newcastle. But the guy's on pens, and you get a lot of minutes. I mean, 4 games is 10% of a season.
Yeah.
So you're basically getting a penalty taker who's sometimes playing 10. I think that there is, I mean, to be fair, to at least from my side, I'm likely to go McAllister just for those reasons. I just think the volume of games, penalties, and all of those things just add up.
And he's not just a 10, he's a fairly attacking 8 also. Like, he's a good pick. I won't have anything to say against him.
Do you guys have a preference over either Arsenal mid, Martinelli, or Odegaard?
Actually, this is something which we'll probably discuss when the Fantasypedia charts come up, because I was looking at our Arsenal channel on the Discord, and the few Arsenal fans that we spoke to said that if there's the teams that Arsenal are going to face, if it looks like they're going to concede central or on their left-hand side, on Martinelli's side, go him. Otherwise, go Odegaard. Like if you're looking at the fixtures that Arsenal have, Brighton is probably, if you're trying to think about the game, a game where Martinelli gets tons of space. But Forest and Wolves Forest may be also an open game, but Wolves seem like a game where actually Wolves is also fairly open. Geez, these fixtures for Arsenal are actually incredible.
Yes.
They're incredible from an attacking. Even Brighton, from an attacking point of view, is a ridiculously good fixture.
Brighton have only
I think
kept
I'd go
2 away
Martinelli.
clean sheet this season. Somebody in our Discord mentioned. So away they are quite leaky.
I'd go Martinelli, I think. Like I also actually, this is a question I asked Baker a couple of days ago. What do you make of Odegaard as an FPL asset? It's something I struggle with, and I want to actually take mental note of that for next season. Because whenever picking an Arsenal mid, I don't know if I'll be able to pick an Odegaard over a Saka or a Martinelli, whatever the case. And I think the prices will be closer next season, and we're talking upward of 8.5 for these Arsenal mids. What do you make of Odegaard as a big Pras?
Look, I think he's basically, these are all mini Man City players, so mini De Bruyne, and the guy on the left is mini Foden, which is Martinelli. So absent anything else, they should all be equally priced, and over a season they should score similar points. But what makes it complicated is if you're only picking one, and if you want to captain one, then it comes down to who's the penalty taker. So Saka becomes a little bit higher in priority. If it's a little bit of a counter-attacking game, like a Brighton game, then Martinelli becomes a little bit bigger. But to be honest, if you're not captaining them, then you just need to hold and be patient. We've seen this. People shifted from Martinelli to Odegaard, and then Odegaard to Martinelli, and then now again people are talking about Odegaard instead of Martinelli. It's just a circle.
Yeah. Like what's happening in my head when I'm watching Martinelli score those goals, especially from outside the box? It just, my brain immediately telling me that's not sustainable.
Odegaard scored
that ain't
those
going to
goals,
happen. Yeah. When Odegaard scores those goals, like the thought in my head is that. So what do you make of that?
15 goals is serious
And 8
FPL
assists.
territory, and is serious FPL royalty now. He's already over 200 points, and like you said, like the algorithms have always liked Odegaard even last year, but I've never got on board with him as a pick. And the thing with him is, I guess you have to be very patient. They're going to be bad in spells, like how we saw like before, like this entire glut of goals. There was a period where 3-4 games where he did absolutely nothing. So he's sort of more of a stick and forget, but I do feel Martinelli is the one I'm going to go for next year because he does feel more explosive. That being said, when once Europe kicks in for Arsenal, who do you think is going to be more nailed? Odegaard, right?
Yep.
Definitely.
So that X minutes is always how I pick. So I'll probably be switching then, keeping that in mind.
Nice. And if you guys had to pick outside of Brighton for your March replacements, where would you go? Arsenal for you, Zoph?
For Arsenal, yes, but let's talk also about some of the teams near the bottom, right? I don't think Doucouré is a bad shout. I like the positions he was getting into, very advanced, very central, and Calvert-Lewin is not playing, is sort of playing a more of a creative role than the goal scorer the way they're set up now. So I like Doucouré as an outside shout. McNeil feels a bit chasey, but Doucouré I really like.
Thing is, Everton play City at home this week. That's the
Edison in goal, baby.
yeah. great time to put that. Pras, where do you go? Punting? If you
Look, I mean, we have to, in the 3 games, you have to get a thrashing in. And Arsenal is the one team that can get a 6-0 thrashing in there. By the way, even if the league is gone against Wolves at home in Game Week 38, that's a thrashing fixture. So you got to get that brace or hat trick, and I think you just chase that. I think Arsenal.
Yeah, I won't be surprised if Arsenal score 9 more goals before the end of the season. Just looking at the fixtures alone. And if you buy a ticket there, you're looking at 6-7-ish returns. That's just good. Yeah. Outside point, I just want to make, while we're doing this, I just want to make a case for Wilfried Zaha, because I think Palace are safe, and I think Roy is not going to stop his swashbuckling, attacking brand of football that he's been implementing. 2 home games. Zoph, did you, when your team played Bournemouth, did you feel like they were leaky-ish? Like, what was your perception from that game?
I thought we could score, which is surprising every time we went forward, but that was also to do with the team selection that was better.
Yeah.
But Bournemouth's defensive numbers have been poor, even though they've right now gone full on all out attack mode. I think the last 5-6 games, there are both teams to score side.
Yeah. If anybody is looking for a punt, like, my shout is Zaha. Just think he's a good pick for the end of the season.
Should we do a quick roundup top 3?
I think it's difficult to do a top 3 roundup, right? Like,
We haven't mentioned the Newcastle mids, by the way.
Yeah, let's talk about the Newcastle bits. So I had a chat with Neil, who's editor of Fantasy Football Scout and a Newcastle United fan, and I asked him, a lot of people are considering Joe Linton versus Willock. What do you think is the situation here? And him and Tom both actually think that because of Longstaff's injury, Joe Linton is going to be spending a fair amount of time in midfield and not on that left-hand side position, which was his for the first half of the season, etc. Which probably means that when Joe Linton and Willock both are playing in midfield, Willock's underlying numbers are just far superior. That said, Neil gave sort of a, what's it called? It's like a warning, where he said that Willock shoots a lot, but he's just a terrible finisher. So you have to hope to get lucky. I mean, his underlying, he's top for NPXGI since game week 27 or something amongst all Newcastle United players. So his underlying numbers are really, really interesting. And what I also think what I like about Willock as a structure point of view is he's removing money out of one spot. And then you're done with that. If you want to punt, it offers slightly more flexibility for the final 2 or 3 game weeks of the season. So yeah, I based on just what Neil has said, I'd say Willock.
Yep. If I would go, because Murphy, I think, is again, there's a bit of rotation thread there with Almiron also lurking.
Yeah.
But Longstaff would be interesting because I think he also has an effect on their defense. I think they're a much better defensive side when Longstaff is playing. So
Longstaff is very important because he's got an effect on the defense, and he's somewhat got an effect on Callum Wilson's expected minutes also.
Correct, because Isak's minutes on the left wing with Joe Linton, etc. Okay, we'll segue to Newcastle soon. Let's just wrap this section up. Top 3 replacements for March. Pras, I'll come to you first.
I'll go for McAllister still, despite all we've said. Second is an Arsenal player. If you can get to an Arsenal player for free, then I think I like that more. But I think most teams, I mean, there's a big price difference. March is like 5.2, 5.3, and we're talking Arsenal mids are 7 million. But let's say price indifference, I still think McAllister number 1. Number 2, I would go an Arsenal mid, and I don't have a view between Odegaard and Martinelli. I think you pick one and you pray. And the third one would be maybe a Palace bid. So Eze or Zaha.
ULR?
Yeah, I'd agree with what Pras said, but I'd also say that if you're chasing, then I wouldn't go McAllister because I expect most of the people ahead in your leagues to go McAllister because it's the most sensible thing to do.
pretty much.
And it's okay. I don't think it's a big risk to go without McAllister.
I think you can go against him, and I would just have Doucouré as a third pick instead of the Palace. I think we're pretty much aligned.
And I think there was a question in Discord, right? Hassan was asking if you take a hit for March to McAllister. I think we're all aligned. You don't need to do that. If you can find another way, or maybe
Only
play
if that
Trent.
hit is a fruitful transfer for the next 3 game weeks.
Correct, because
Otherwise,
ultimately
no need.
March you have to realize you've pretty much done for us for the season, right? The hit is not for this week; it's for the next 2 weeks, and it all depends on how your squad looks the week after. If you have a strong bench, because a lot of people will be benching Trent next week as well, so you have to factor a lot of that in. And we will talk about selection dilemmas. There are a lot of them this week. Let's segue to Newcastle.
Isak versus Wilson, straight up first.
Let's do that. We've got some numbers that Pras you sent us earlier. This is since game week 29. The minutes, the goals, the expected goal involvement. So since I think Wilson's on 5.05, Isak is on 2.96. But it's not as clear cut as that, is it? Because I think a lot of Wilson's numbers are from that one game against Southampton, 2.38 there alone. Where are you on this, Pras?
Look, I think first let's talk about the lay of the land between the two guys, right? I mean, game week 29 is when Wilson first came back from injury. So he started getting a few minutes. So he got 6 minutes. He got a goal out of that. Then he got a start. That was his first start, which was the second game of double game week 29. This is important because that was the first midweek game that Newcastle had. Then he got a start, got a couple of goals. Then he didn't start the next two. Isak did. And in fact, then the next time he started was again a midweek, which was game week 33 against Everton. So in this period, I think the only 2 starts he's had is, I'll come to the Arsenal one last. The only 2 he's had before the Arsenal game was Everton and West Ham, which were both midweek games. The first time they both started together was against Arsenal. And I think there was a little bit of an overreaction on how bad they looked together, but that was just because it's Arsenal. I mean, that was a great team and it was a great performance. Newcastle did well, but it was just that it was felt that they don't do as well together. During this period, the same period, Isak has only missed 2 games. Again, those 2 midweek games. So game week 29 and game week 33. And the irony is whenever Wilson comes in, Isak either subs out or he moves to the left. So there has never been a period where they've both played centrally together. So if Wilson is on the pitch, Isak is a little bit on the periphery. And this is seen in the XG numbers. So if you look at the XG numbers, Wilson, we've only shown XGI because Wilson is pure XG. There is no XA. But between Isak's numbers, if you look at, for example, a good one is game week 34 against Southampton. He basically created 0 XG, even though he started, because Wilson came on at halftime and then he took basically control of that game. Another example is if you look at game week, where else did he start on the left? Well, in the last game, essentially it was the opposite. Though, even though Wilson started in the middle, Isak played on the left, but he did look threatening on the left. So summary of what I'm trying to say is, if Isak plays on the left, he does create some XA, but it pretty much kills his XG to an extent. But if Wilson is on the pitch, he gets a lot of XG, and he does that even if he subs on. So that was basically a little bit on the table and what we were trying to say. To your questions off on where I am between the two, look, I mean, it's the first game in this game week. So there is a chance that we get some news on who is starting. But I think absent any leak, it has to be Isak, because you know that Isak is getting the minutes. He will get some minutes in the middle. And, well, he'll definitely get one start in the middle. Wilson may not start both games. So absent any information, I would go Isak personally. I don't know, LR, where you are.
I mean, this time, last week, I was a lot more bullish on Wilson than I am today, for example. Like, I was 75% Wilson, 25% Isak. The thing is, I still think with Longstaff injured, Isak left, Wilson central is their best team at the moment. Like, I don't have that much confidence about that matter. And to your point about, it doesn't seem like it when I'm watching Newcastle that Isak is peripheral. Like, he's more Rashford inside forward than he is a winger. You know what I'm saying? His position, like, he's also making the runs. If you think about the header chance that he had, he was right behind Nelson. He's always making a lot of those inward runs, etc. And I think it's a small sample set in terms of when they play to learn to play with each other. I think the more they do it, the better they get. All things considered, I'm still leaning towards Wilson, because I just think he's a chance hogger. His position is always central, etc. But I like I was thinking of coming into the pod last week thinking, no, Wilson is the pick. Don't go for Isak. I don't feel that way anymore. Because I do think that Isak's expected minutes are higher. And if you actually think about it, if you notice a slight trend, Isak tends to do better amongst the opposition that's slightly better. Like you think about, look at the numbers here: 0.69 XGI versus United, 0.41 versus Arsenal, and 0.49 versus Tottenham. Now, if I'm thinking about the Brighton game, I can see lots of space for Isak, who tends to make runs behind, and Brighton tend to offer that kind of space to their opposition as well. So that game actually suits Isak a lot more, and I won't be surprised that Wilson sits that. And if you think about the Leeds game, where Big Sam actually might play slightly defensive and park a little, that sort of game suits Wilson a lot more. If you're trying to think about how the game might go, so I think my prediction is Wilson probably gets the Leeds game. And based on how that game goes, the lineup in the Brighton game is different. There's not much to split. I'm 55 Wilson, 45 Isak.
I think I'm quite keen on Isak or Wilson because also 37 and 38 are key for me, not just 36, right? I'm not going to be using a transfer because Leicester are shipping goals all over the place. It's a good fixture. 38 against Chelsea also, there's goals over there for both teams. So keeping those two fixtures in mind, I'm ready to forego maybe the small loss this week if Wilson does outscore him. So unless the leak we get on Saturday says that Wilson's starting and Isak is benched, I'm likely going for the Swedish guy.
But the loss isn't a small loss of your captaining this week, though, Zoph. Like, I think that's a consideration.
That's the main thing,
Yeah.
right? Because ultimately that's what it comes down to. And like we said, I think we're underrating Isak a little bit. I think just because he's playing out wide. And another thing we haven't mentioned is Saint Maximin on the left wing. I think he's much more effective than placing Isak than placing Wilson, because Wilson is intelligent. But from what I saw during the Arsenal game, his movement is nowhere near as good as Isak is. Isak offers a lot more to the team. And you remember the goal that they scored against Man United, the first goal, Newcastle? The pass that Isak laid off over there, which was then crossed over by, I don't remember who crossed it, maybe Willock or ASM. But that's what Isak brings to the team that Wilson doesn't. Go ahead.
But that's very Arsenal game specific. Like, you're talking about a team that dominates that much position, has been hands down the second best team in the league. The City far and above, like the top two, and the distance between everybody else after them is wide. So I think it's just, we can't use what happened in that game as a example of what might happen in the other games, because it's going to be different from what we saw and what we're going to see in the games that are coming. So just that little thing, like, don't take that Arsenal, because I can think of games that you see on the list here where Wilson just offered what Isak did. Even if you're talking about the home game against Southampton, for example, like, Newcastle weren't offering much in the first half, which is why that change happened, and Wilson completely changed the game. So that's the thing where it comes to,
But
if you
again,
take
the
that Arsenal
Southampton
performance
game, the Southampton game is also very game state dependent, right? Because they were down at halftime, and then after that they were just battering the goal. So again, the 2.38 xG I think is a little bit inflated because those chances were from so close. Each chance had high individual xG rather than an accumulation of lot of chances, right?
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point was that tactically Newcastle looked a lot better with Wilson playing central than Isak in such a game. Like, that was the point.
I mean, look at the two starts Wilson has had. So ignore the Southampton game where he came on, and yes, it was game state. I think they were chasing the game, and he happened to get a lot of high XG chances. So against West Ham, 1.01 XGI. Against Everton, 0.5. Those are elite XGI numbers. I mean, over 0.5 is good. Isak, not in a single game, has got an XG of over 0.5 in any one game. So yes, he does a lot better. When you look at the match, he's dribbling, he's holding the ball up better. He won points, right? So basically, all I'm trying to say is equal minutes. I think we all agree that Wilson is better. I think you make a good point, Zoph, that if you want this player in 37 or 38, I think that's team dependent. For example, I don't need the Isak spot in 37. I actually would like to upgrade him to a Jesus if I can, actually, in game week 38. So it's a little bit team dependent if you want to keep that spot. I think that's an excellent point. If you wanted that slot later, Isak, I mean, you don't even need to wait for the league. I think you just go for Isak. But I think as an upside pick, I think, if you know that Wilson is starting, and we'll come to a scenario planning in a bit, then I think it could be worth going Wilson.
Yeah. I'm excited for that now. Let's do it now.
Let's do it now.
Shall we do it? Okay. So we have like a 5-10 minute segment where I want to just go through with our two boys what happens if a certain player starts. So let's say it's 10 minutes to deadline and you haven't yet made your transfer. And we're in the scenario that neither of you own Isak or Wilson. So it's basically just picking one. So this is how we're trying to help people. So I'm going to note down your answers, and this will be important when we come to captaincy later as well.
But are you going to go all bucker on me if I change my mind?
No, I won't. No, don't worry. Don't worry. I've already got my answers, by the way. So I will tell you my answers later. But this is it's basically putting you in a position that this is 10 minutes to deadline. The Instagram post is up. You put your AirPods because you have to listen to what the announcement is. Who is starting? And
the deadline streams last weekend. Shout out.
That was crazy stuff. All right. So it says
Shout out
Isak
to FPL.
starts, Wilson is benched.
Sorry, please repeat.
Isak starts, Wilson is benched.
So who do I buy?
I get Isak in.
Isak in. Yep.
So don't tell me who you buy. First, now you tell me how many minutes will Isak get in the first game, and then you also have to tell me how many minutes you think Isak and Wilson will get in this. We're only doing minutes. So I think if he's starting, we're saying he gets 90, something like that. So just basically helping with the first one.
I say 90.
I think he's good for 160 both games.
So 90 in the first game and 80 in the second, or something like that. 80 or 90 in the first game, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
You agree, both of you?
Yes.
Okay. So now tell me Wilson's minutes.
30
If
first game.
Isak's
If first game, I think 30, 90, 120, Ella?
Yeah, 110.
Fair enough. I'd agree.
So 30 and 90.
Yeah.
I like it. So what you're basically saying is that Isak has started the first game, and in the second game you're predicting that if you hear it's only him, both of them will start against Brighton.
Yeah.
I think so.
Right? Because you predicted 90 for both of them
Yeah.
against Brighton. Okay. So now the news says only Wilson is starting. Isak is on the bench.
I'd get Wilson. Because the money game, I think, is the Leeds fixture.
Yeah. I get
So
Wilson.
tell me the minutes. What do you think?
Inverse, exactly inverse. Because I am actually much more confident generally of a Brighton start for Isak. And I think it's a good fixture for an attacker also.
Yeah, because the Leicester game makes more sense for Wilson to start, right? I think if you look at it, let's look at it as a 3-game space also. But if I was how, I'd rather want Wilson for the Leicester game than for the Brighton game. So
what you're saying is Isak is benched. So Wilson gets 90, but in the second game, do you predict a start for Wilson?
no, he comes on. 30, 120.
If Wilson braces, I mean, what is he saving Wilson for? Like
That's
that's the
true.
thing also, right? It's the end of the season. Like you got a striker hot, etc. So if it's going to be dependent, but okay, if you have to predict, I'll give a slightly more mellow prediction than I gave for Isak. Would be like 140, 150 range.
So
Okay,
you
so
predict a second
91
start as
one
well.
game.
You predict a second
50
start as well.
minutes.
I would probably say 30. So 120 for me. 90, 30.
Okay, 90-30. Okay, for Isak, so he's obviously benched. So you'd think he'll get 30-40 minutes in this game, and then he starts the next game, right? So
Correct.
30 plus 90?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next scenario. Both Isak and Wilson are starting.
I'll get Wilson.
I'd get
Tell me the
Isak.
minutes first.
Minutes, Adar. You go first.
Wilson 140, Isak 160.
Break it down for me. Just basically, I want to know who starts which game. In the
Wilson
second game, what are you
70.
predicting will start?
70, it's more like 60, 70 plus 60, 70 for Wilson and 90 plus 75 for Isak. It's sort of in my head.
You're saying Eddie Howe has basically decided they're both starting together in both the
Yeah.
games. What about you, Zoph?
I think now both,
Because it's the second time they do it after the Arsenal game also. So it's indicative of a trend given the situation.
I would have agreed with you if not Saint Maximin. I think Howe likes him. I think he's a bit of a wild card, and I think he'll want to throw him in one of the games. So, assuming both start, I think Isak gets 90 in the first, maybe. I'd say 90 possibly in both. I'm quite bullish on his minutes in that sense. And then Wilson, let's say he starts one, and then that probably gets 30 to 40 in the other.
So this is exactly the very interesting scenario. Sorry, LR, you were saying something.
And all of this is very result dependent, in my opinion, because Liverpool are breathing down both our asses at the moment. So
You have to assume Newcastle win. This is the base assumption here.
Okay.
Good. Right? I mean, of course, if one could brace, if Wilson braces, I get it. I get where you're going with it. But we cannot expect that. So we have to expect a Newcastle win with a couple of goals, maybe one of Isak scores, one of them returns. So that's it. Okay. If there is no news, so fourth one. So Zoph, I'll come to you. If there's no news, what is your assumption in the first three scenarios? Is it just Isak start? Is it both start or just Wilson start?
I'd assume an Isak start because I think Leeds. I don't know if they're a physical team anymore, but I still think they are in my head. Maybe that's why, and maybe how thinks they are a physical team who are going to run a lot, which is not a sort of game that necessarily suits Wilson. I think he can make an impact from the bench more so in that game. So I'd assume that Isak starts, Wilson benched.
You agree, Ella?
No, I think Wilson's likelier for Leeds and Isak's likelier for Brighton.
But with no news, you will assume Wilson is starting Leeds and Isak is starting. Okay, excellent. This is very nice. This is we've all got differing views. So
What about you,
okay,
Pras?
so let me. So I'll add mine. So basically, if it's only Isak, then I've assumed that Isak will get 90 and Wilson gets 30 in the second game. Wilson starts because that's been the trend. Where if it's a midweek game, then one of them each starts, and Eddie Howe has basically said, I'm done with this experiment. So my assumption was that if Isak only starts, then it's going to be Isak starting this one and Wilson starting the midweek game. If Wilson only starts, that's a little awkward because we've not seen that before, or we've seen it in the sense when it's a midweek game, not in a weekend game. But I think again they might rotate. So Wilson will get 60 and 30, and then Isak will get the midweek start, so 30 and 90. If Isak and Wilson both start, I've assumed that again over the midweek, Wilson will be the one who misses, simply because Wilson's body, you can assume he cannot take so many starts in a row. And then my base assumption is that Isak start in the first game and a Wilson start in the midweek, because that's been the trend that we've seen so far. So we will revisit this. I will revisit your answers when we come to captaincy.
No, let's do it now.
Shall we do it now?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's go.
Yeah,
These
expression
are the
ahead.
captaincy guys anyway, right? Let's have the discussion
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now my question to you is, let's assume that only Isak is starting. And both of you have told me that if Isak is starting, actually LR said he might start both the games, but the second game, even if he starts, Wilson will definitely start that one. He's going to play left wing and that second game.
Yeah.
So you get one start against Leeds, and then you get one start maybe, or it could be just Wilson, like we've seen in other trends. How is he a captaincy shout?
Like, I'll tell you how he's a captaincy shout. It's because two or three things. Last 6 games, last 4 games, last 6 games, like Newcastle are top for XG. Like they are right now in a good attacking moment. And Brighton X crumble is kind of high. I mean, they just shipped 5 goals to, and the likelihood of Newcastle keeping a clean sheet against Brighton isn't very high. These are the factors that are in my head.
Okay, fair. So Zoph,
Yeah.
if I'm telling you Isak is starting this game, but there's a high likelihood that he's benched for Wilson in midweek, as the trend has shown, or he's playing on left wing, he's still a captaincy shout for you?
Very much so, because I don't mind him on the left wing, because what I've noticed is baseline BPS is very high. Even an assist means it's usually a 6-point assist. And I think he can do damage. Like LR mentioned, he's sort of the inside forward. I'm not put off by his left wing role at all.
Okay.
And also,
so it's
like,
more the benching.
and Isak owners, Pras, just generally to align your thoughts in terms of what I'm thinking. If Isak plays CF against Leeds, and if he plays inside forward against Brighton, money slot, if you ask me. Like,
Okay.
that's the position in which Isak is a very good captaincy option. Like, I feel like I know what you're thinking about, but you need to realign if you find out that Isak is starting and Wilson isn't in the first game.
Yeah, he might be up against Gross at right back.
Yeah.
That's a favorable
Fair,
matchup.
fair. Okay. So I think Isak only Isak start, I give you. Okay, then Isak becomes a great captaincy shout. Now let's go to Isak and Wilson start. So you told me, LR, that you expect both games. If it's Isak and Wilson starting, in both the games you expect Isak and Wilson starting.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, you will basically get Wilson and captain him. Is that correct?
In most scenarios, I'm getting Wilson. I think it's because I'm chasing.
So except for the first
Yeah.
scenario. I mean,
Yeah.
if Wilson is on the bench in the first game and we get a leak,
Then I'm
get
getting Isak. On paper, actually, now that you did this exercise and we're calculating things and doing, and I'm thinking about a lot more, Isak's just a good shot.
Exactly. That's what
Just a good shot.
exactly was thinking in my head also, because
Yeah.
if they
Yeah.
are starting against Leeds again, then it becomes very performance dependent. What happens in the second game? If they have a poor result, then one of them is going to be on the chopping block, and I feel it won't be Isak. Because
As in, if they both start,
they both start against
you are
Leeds,
thinking that they won't start again, both of them.
then it becomes performance dependent. Let's say they both bang Newcastle, win handsomely, then there's more incentive for it to happen, for him to start both. But let's say the result goes awry again, like how it happened against Arsenal, it doesn't click, then he will likely chop and change. So that uncertainty is there.
And BFS is going to play his best game against Newcastle. Like that's his last shot, or one of the last shots, to get some points.
This is basically the most interesting scenario, both of them starting, because all I've seen so far is if they hear Wilson is starting up top and Isak is playing on the left, people will get Wilson and Captain Wilson. And basically this exercise, at least in this scenario, at least helps me to know that I still want Isak instead of Wilson.
Correct.
If both are starting.
Yeah. It's
Right? So even if it's the
that
money picture,
little
even if it's
antenna.
Wilson, I think Isak is the better pick if both are starting. The only scenario in which Wilson becomes a better pick is if we know Wilson is starting against Leeds. Even then, you can debate that Isak will get the start against Brighton, and you may want to go for a guy who you need later on.
Big asterisk mark. Isak is the better pick based on this conversation, based on expected minutes alone. Like that's the big asterisk mark here, because Wilson on the field gets more chances, the better chances, the bigger chance. So, like if you're playing an expected minutes game alone, fair enough. But I don't think, and there's a lot to be said about that. I don't think the game we play is just an expected minutes,
Especially
game
now,
alone. Like
in the final stretch.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're asking me to put money on who's likely to get a hat trick, it's Wilson.
That's the issue.
The only scenario where I can see myself being a little bit confused is if Isak is benched and Wilson starts. Because then I would obviously be tempted to, because let's face it, right? Once you hear a player is going to be benched, you're not going to place the armband on him. It's just human nature.
correct.
We won't do it. And that's the probably case, only case I see myself buying Wilson and captain.
Yeah, after just having this conversation, I just don't. I think it's very, very, very unlikely that Isak doesn't start the next.
I'd agree.
I just think it's very.
I think in terms of pecking order, he is the first choice striker. No matter how much he tries to appease Wilson, how much damage Wilson does, I think very much Isak is their first choice centre forward.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. He's the better pick. Yeah.
So that, I mean, basically amongst all this, when we talk about minutes as well, the only scenario in which I'm a bit skeptical. So either one starts, you pick them and you possibly captain them. If both start, that's the one I wanted to really discuss. And I think I'm even at the moment thinking if both start, pick Isak instead of Wilson and not captain him. And that was basically my thinking.
I don't think, like, we've had a chat and it's time to just reveal that you're thinking about Trippier captain. I don't think the Newcastle forward is just a standout captaincy. Good captaincy option, but I will not put off anybody going against a Trippier captaincy option, because I just think because of the twos and the ones that we've seen in the last 14 game weeks, I think I was reading a stat, it's 2.6 points or something in the last 4 game weeks, and they've kept one clean sheet in the last. I think now when they can't afford to drop points, I think they do go for a slightly defense first approach, secure the result. I don't think they can afford to be as loosey-goosey, because they want 3 points. They don't want to concede goals. And Trippier's, even if he doesn't give an assist, it's almost likely to be a 9-point clean sheet, because it's Kieran Trippier that we're talking about. So
it's the Leeds game.
I wouldn't talk anybody off it. And I mean, so close. I mean, 4 chances created in the last game. Just put the ball on the head for Shah. Very close to an assist there also. So Trippier's quality, at least from an attacking perspective.
In terms of X minutes, he's possibly the most secure.
Yeah.
I mean, he's definitely the most secure. I mean, the thinking with Trippier, just if we're going there, is basically Leeds will sit back. I mean, you saw against Man City, they hardly came out of their box. The only shot, of course, it was Edison, so they scored. But basically, that was the only time where they came out of their box. Even at 2-0, they didn't commit at all. So we expect that from Big Sam.
It'll be different though, right? Now they have only 3 games. This is what are the fixtures after this? They have West Ham and then game week 38. Who do they play? At Spurs, right?
Spurs.
So I think this is the only home game.
Yeah, no, and Spurs.
and Spurs, right? So ultimately, I don't think Big Sam is going to be as negative as he was against Man City, because I think from a coaching perspective, that was the game he used to get the defensive shape in order. I think this week they would have been working more so on attack, and at home, I think he's going to be a bit more front foot.
That
Yeah,
said, I still like the odds of a Newcastle clean sheet in that game. Like, just I understand it still leads, etc., and they've got a fair bit of flair, but like, I won't be surprised. And if you're talking about a game where if Pras is saying that Leeds are going to sit, it sort of favors Trippier if
that's
Newcastle
the
hog
thing.
majority of the possession, etc. as well. I
In ge-
wouldn't put. I almost think Trippier is a slightly underrated pick as a captaincy option. I'm not going to go there, but I just think he's slightly underrated because you're finally getting a chance to get some Trippier points into the bank.
So there are two things also about Trippier. I think Baker mentioned it on his pod. Murphy playing has sort of changed Trippier's role a little bit, because Murphy is doing a lot of the crossing in front of him. And you mentioned Newcastle have been loosey goosey. The underlying numbers are still good. They've been doing the Man City thing. Just that one cheap goal they've been letting in every game. The XGC numbers have still been consistently good. It's just that they've not been keeping the clean sheet. So the defensive numbers are still all right. So I buy that argument. But in general, the Premier League has forgotten how to defend. There's an article in the Athletic about this also yesterday, that the clean sheets have been very sparse in general. So it doesn't feel right when Leeds have something to play for. Like, as soon as Newcastle scored, Leeds cannot sit back. That's pretty much their season done. They have to go for it, and you expect Newcastle to score, right? So the matchup doesn't scream clean sheet to me.
I mean, that's just a macro point. I mean, if you manage to get a clean sheet at this point of the season, just buy a ticket to the lottery. It's the amalgamation of the final stretch of the longest playing season these players have had for as much as I can remember. Because if you're thinking about World Cup minutes, and while players, if even if they weren't playing the World Cup, they were training for a longer time. So it's just the longest extended duration that they've had. So normally they get leggy towards the end of the season, even more so now.
I mean, I mean, from my perspective, all the thinking was lots of possession. Trippier will have set pieces. They will hold the ball up. They will play in their side. And again, it comes down to, if Newcastle score early, then maybe they will have to come forward, and the game becomes a lot more open. It ends up being a 3-1. On the other side, at least if I see where the game plan, it could be 0-0 at halftime, ends up being a 1-0 or a 2-0 game. So I can equally see basically it being a clean sheet as well. But look, we cannot predict clean sheets these days. It's very hard to do so. So I think it's as much a punt as going for a striker who we don't think start both games. That was the reason for this exercise. I don't think there's a consensus here that we know a striker, and I see in the chat a lot of people are saying Isak should start both. We have factually seen cases where when there's a midweek game, Wilson has started, Isak has not started. It's a fact. Whether he does in this time or not, obviously we don't know. So that's basically my skepticism. And if Brighton had an easier double, then we won't have this discussion at all. It's the fact that they have
But
a difficult double.
I think it's a discussion to have. Like, I think we shouldn't rule out Mitoma as a
We shouldn't.
captaincy option at all, because I don't think Brighton, from an attacking perspective, are going to be any different. Especially Newcastle haven't been razor sharp at the back. Arsenal haven't been either. I think they will have their chances in the game. And you know, I wrote an article like 4 weeks or 5 weeks ago where actually these red games are good games for attackers, because they tend to get more space than they do against teams that sit. So can I see Mitoma being the last man making the run behind? Yes, which is why I just think he's a good captaincy option. I think when it comes to our perspective, we need to sort of very strongly realign our heads in terms of how we see our attackers, at least in these tough games.
Okay. Would you consider a Brighton cap, Zoph?
Not really. I think the ceiling is higher with the Newcastle guys, because Brighton, just like even he mentioned how Mitoma is struggling to play these 3 games a week in terms of fatigue and stuff like that. And both the teams are very strong at home. Arsenal and Newcastle, I know they both been shipping goals off late, but the ceiling doesn't feel there. And goes to my same argument why I don't like Trippier. You get one clean sheet, maybe 9 points. The other, let's say you get 2 points in the next fixture. It feels like a
Yeah.
10 to 11. I'm not feeling that maximum like 15, 18 point score from Trippier versus the Newcastle forwards. Or
And
Mitoma.
us and Newcastle have done like 3-0, 4-0 finals this season. Like when they do lead the game 2-0 at halftime, they've been known to blow off the opposition. So there is a possibility that they do something like
More at home though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And the home
Yeah.
game is the Brighton game, not the
that.
Leeds
But the
game.
Brighton game
It's a money game.
Can also become
good
like
game.
that.
Yeah, it's
Fair.
become a good game, especially because they're leaky, right? Like Brighton defensively aren't. I mean, how much your attention you pay to the Everton game is a different. Is it that they just gave Everton no respect whatsoever and everybody was far? Because there was so much space for all these Everton players. Like they were just in Candyland. Like Zoph and me could have interplayed and at least managed to get a shot against that team playing
If
so
McNeil
forward.
can,
So,
anyone can.
Yeah. Right. Just while we're on the topic of Brighton and Newcastle, I think it's important to get relevant questions out of the way. If anybody has a perfect team, is Botman to Shah worth an upgrade?
Yeah.
No, I'd use a transfer for later on. Unless you have 2 free transfers, you're going to burn one. I think that transfer is more valuable in 38.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a scenario where you're burning a transfer, right? No. Then you
Yeah,
save
a transfer or just generally, what are your thoughts about Botman to Shah?
I don't necessarily feel it's worth it.
I think it's a double game week. There is upside. I mean, clearly,
Because
if there's
37 and 38,
Botman
will you
got
be playing
something-
Shah? That guy, that also matters, right? Ultimately, are you making that
Yeah,
transfer
yeah.
just for this week of upside? Or we have Leicester next week, which who we know are a little bit poor from set pieces, and Shah's numbers are much better at home. There's a clear disparity in his shot volume home and away. So if you get him, you should probably be playing him for the 2 fixtures rather than just one.
Yeah. Brighton,
Fair.
Leicester, both home. That's it. I think we've covered everything that we
There's
have to.
a
with
popular question also we should cover this, which is if people want to go 2 strikers.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, some people have 2 free transfers and they want to get rid of one Brighton defender, let's say Botman, and get Wilson and Isak. What do you think, Zoph?
I guess that would mean that if it's for free, I don't mind it. But again, I'm possibly thinking long term for no reason. Again, in 37, you'll probably be benching one of those guys, right? Probably,
Yeah. But it's
probably in
okay. I
38
think
as
people
well.
mostly have a.
It feels a little bit like forcing it to me because ultimately you can captain only one player, and it wouldn't be surprising if the defender matches the striker.
Yeah, but Zoph, if you think about it from just a games played perspective, it's 50% of the season left.
I
Like
know.
2 games versus.
I know that's what difficult for me to get my head around that aspect, but like I just feel it's forcing the move. I think you could possibly do more with those transfers in other game weeks than necessarily this one.
I don't mind it, but I would also say that consider Enciso as a forward option because he buys you that extra thing.
You had mentioned Enciso in the earlier section also. I think I don't necessarily feel as secure about his minutes as you do because we saw Evan Ferguson is back. I think he becomes a first choice striker, and they have that Buona Notte guy, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, who can play on the right wing as well. So they have options over there. So I'm not as bullish on Enciso probably as you.
I just think the difference in quality between Enciso and Buona Notte is pretty significant. I just think he's next in line. He was challenging March and Mitoma to take their position. So I rate him that much for me to be fairly confident about him.
What about you, Pras, on this?
And I think,
sorry,
just from a structure point of view, he solves a lot of things because he's a striker under 5 million. So just opens up money for punch elsewhere without sacrificing.
As an enabler, I don't mind that. But against someone you're going to stick in your 11 this week and next week, I'm not so fond of it. Plus, where are you on the double striker?
So this is the reason why everything came down to the scenarios that I was talking about. I mean, people who are looking at double striker already have one, and most likely they have Isak. So now they're thinking if they should get Wilson in, right? So in the scenario where both are starting, and you get the news that both are starting, or only Wilson is starting, in those 2 scenarios, we said potentially you could look at Wilson captain. I think then it could be worth it because then you're sitting on a guy who's either benched or playing on the left wing in the first match. Otherwise, you just sit tight because the base expectation is that Isak is the one who gets more minutes and you have that guy. So you don't bother with there isn't enough upside using 2 free transfers to do that. That would be my
correct. Excellent summary. I think the guy you bring it if the captaincy is being tossed on there, it possibly makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. That's enough of Brighton and Newcastle. Just a few questions that we have
already. Go ahead.
So we'll come to the benching dilemmas next because a lot of people, our Discord is flooded with what to do in terms of benching dilemmas. The first question is people have a choice between in defensive spots. They have a choice between Trent versus Shaw versus Estupinan. How do you rank these?
It's a tough one. I'm scarred from the Trent Leicester away performance, the 24-pointer. Did either of you guys have him that week?
I did.
Yes, I had him.
I think he had a blank the previous week. I remember I sold him, and the whole plan was I'd get him right back after this Leicester fixture. So
Yeah.
I'm very scarred. I want to play Trent, and he's got returns in what, 6 or 7 weeks now in a row.
Yeah.
That being said,
I mean,
we all expect Leicester to score, right?
Not necessarily.
No?
9-day break for Liverpool, fully recharged. Like Fulham are sort of loosey goosey. I don't think a Leicester goal is nailed on.
I'm still not enamored by the Liverpool defense. It's all still been very much Team Allison still.
That said, I just expect Liverpool to dominate so much. Like in my head, it is Trent, Estupinan, Shaw in terms of ranking. Like I just don't.
I'd agree.
Like a lot of people are considering benching Trent, and I just want to say, don't bench him. Like, first of all, just so much foreplay in the last 2 or 3 games. He's looking like scoring every single time in the top left corner. And that goal is coming. It's coming either this week or next, but he's coming. He's just getting a lot more on the ball. If Liverpool are blowing Leicester away, 4 or 5 goals, I see Trent having a couple of assists in such a scenario as well. So there's just very much a 15-pointer there for the taking. I wouldn't bench him.
And do you even think Estupinan gets a clean sheet in either game?
If they luck out. Yeah. Maybe the Newcastle game.
Pras, do you think so?
I mean, I think base case no. I think between the two, there's not much. I mean, I know the ceiling that we're talking about, and I agree. I think the ceiling for Trent is higher, which is very odd to say because the single game weaker has the higher ceiling, but that's just where we are. I think obviously the floor is higher for Stupinian because he has the double. He could get 4 points, even though they concede, it could be 3 points or something if they concede 2 goals. So I think, yeah, it's possible that Liverpool concede and Trent blanks, so you get a 1-pointer out of him. But I think for the ceiling argument, I also think Trent is better. And by the way, I can only speak for my team. As soon as Man United lost to West Ham, I put Trent in my team. Because I think the motivations have now completely changed, where Liverpool now smell top 4. As a Man United fan, I hope they don't get there. But at least in terms of where they are, they want to go for it. And this will be the game where, you expect a lot of goals. I actually think it's a 4-1 kind of game because I think there'll be a lot of space for Maddison, Barnes. These guys love space in behind. So I think they will concede, but I think Trent is still good, even if they concede.
I'm on board.
Yeah. And I about United versus Wolves also, United haven't looked convincing. Like we look very leggy. Like at the back, we look very tired. I mean, against West Ham, we were good in the first 30, 35 minutes without creating clear-cut chances per se. But Wolves' problem, even though they've been terrible away, hasn't been their attack. It's been more so their defense, which is sort of anti-Wolves as the Wolves that we know. But they've created enough number of chances. So, and everybody is going to fancy a shot against David De Gea at the moment. So, yeah, I feel very comfortable benching Shaw in a home game also because I don't see a very high ceiling for a Luke Shaw.
Yeah.
Correct. It's only the bonus
That's
points
it.
with the clean sheet you're playing for. There's not much attacking threat.
The solution for Tenak, though, I think the biggest problem is that we've lost Shaw at wing back, I think. Because Malasha isn't cutting it. I think we need that impetus and creativity coming from Shaw. So I won't be surprised if we see him back at wing back, but it's still bench Shaw.
Let's talk City
Yeah, I think
attackers.
Varane is coming back.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, sir.
No, go ahead.
I was saying, for just to close out the Man United thing, Varane is coming back. So I don't think they will play Varane and Lindelof. The only way they will play it is if they're forced. And like you said, that you need Shaw at left back, and therefore you have to do it because he likes the left footer in left centre back. So yeah. Sorry, sir.
No problem. I would say let's talk a little bit about the City attack. Now, we saw that yesterday Mahrez was benched. KDB went off with a knock. So a lot of people have Mahrez and Alvarez from the last week. So now, do you possibly play these guys bench March for 1 week? What do you think? Pras?
Yeah,
I think you can.
Go on, Pras.
No, I'm saying I think you if you're on that Mahrez punt and he's, I wouldn't bench Mahrez this week. I think it's very likely that Mahrez starts. It's a punt, so there's no certainty with Man City mids, but there is upside there. It could be the week where even Haaland misses out. So I'm just sort of nothing scaremongering, but we all know this with City. Between 2 Champions League ties is the time where there's most rotation and it's most unpredictable. we know the lineup already, given how he's been playing in the Champions League. We know pretty much the lineup he will have in the second leg against Real Madrid. So if we work backwards, Foden, Alvarez, Mahrez, all should get a lot of minutes. So I think they're as good picks if you wanted to benchmark, for example.
Yeah. Don't bench Alvarez. I've seen lots of people with Alvarez on their bench. I think he's looking very likely, especially based on how he's performed. He's just looking likely for that Everton game.
Yeah, if you have like a Grealish Alvarez thing, I would possibly take the chance of starting Alvarez over Jack. Ceiling is much higher there, right?
For sure. Like, I think it's a given that you start Alvarez over Grealish this week.
One of
Yeah,
KDB or Haaland will definitely miss out. And
Yeah.
with the niggle that KDB mentioned, or somebody talked about KDB having that niggle that Zoph mentioned, I think it's Alvarez will either start in his position or in Haaland's position, or even on the right. So I think Alvarez start is very likely.
Yeah.
And again, the game state over there, I think Everton will attack a lot more than being defensive. I think they've
Yeah.
seen what they got against Brighton. They're at home. They're going to commit more men forward than they usually do. Should be a good game, that one.
Right.
Any other Discord questions? Yeah, we have one over here from Understanding Football. Where does Lateriser's gut feel go for the next 3 weeks? Attackers only and differentials.
I've mentioned this. I think Arsenal midfielder, go for a Martinelli, Zaha, and Enciso. These are the three I'm feeling.
Right. The Arsenal ones I really fancy more so than the others. I don't
Yeah.
think you can go wrong with either one. I don't think I would go
Yeah.
for Saka now. Definitely looks off the boil a bit.
What do you think about a Liverpool striker / midfielder? They've got good fixtures. Leicester away, Villa home, Southampton away. Like, Leicester is a fixture to target, right? If you're chasing 2-3 goals, this game is a good game to target.
What
It's
is their front
crowded
three?
now.
What is their front three? I
Yeah,
think
they played 4. They
Yep.
played all 4 last game.
they played all 4. That's correct. So probably
Yeah.
Jota would be the one you go for. I'm assuming we all have Salah. Probably Jota could be the one you could punt.
Cool. The problem is there's not a clear pick there. If there was a clear pick there,
Hmm.
we'd go there.
Could we discuss punts for Chaser? Let's just have a quick look at the Fantasypedia zonal weaknesses. First one, Everton, Manchester City. Nothing particularly stands out for Everton. They're weak down their flanks, which again we mentioned, your Mahrez, Fodens, etc. should get some joy over here. Did Foden start last night? No, right?
No.
I don't think he did. So again, I think both
Belva,
those guys could
Bernardo.
get.
They had the same lineup and no substitutions all game.
Yeah, so Jack and
It was
Bernardo, right?
Bernardo and Jack.
Yeah. My God, what a game that was, though. Like, the level, the quality, like, we are far, far behind that level. Like, such a good game to watch. Everybody thought that City would blow Madrid away, but Madrid were so bloody good for 60-70 minutes. Like, if people haven't seen that game, just watch the game back, because I think it was just a delight to watch.
There's a
Beautiful.
huge
I mean,
disparity in
speed
numbers.
with which,
Sorry, Pras, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just saying that the speed with which Vinicius, Modric, Benzema were passing in the final third. It was basically the ball was zipping, and then they were taking
Yeah.
a shot.
Yeah, they're
Obviously-
playing in like 6th gear all game.
What I was mentioning was there's a huge disparity in the numbers in Europe this year, home and away. I think home they've scored 20 goals, away they've scored only 5 or 7. So Pep is setting up a little bit different in away matches. I
Yeah.
think they'll win at the Etihad. What's your early gut pick on that?
I think if Madrid saw out the game, I'd probably have fancied them, but I think slightly leaning towards City. But it's just a difficult game to call.
Pras?
I'm Hala Madrid, man. I can't have City win the treble.
You
So
guys
I'm not
could-
predicting. I'm going to.
You guys could still
Even
stop
your
them with
boy
that.
Rudiger was marking Haaland, and even that battle was just fun to watch. He was extremely aggressive throughout the game.
Rudiger's a beast, man. I
Yeah.
miss him a lot. That's all right.
Yeah.
This is the big one. This is the Newcastle matchups. Now the weakness for Leeds is particularly down not Isak's wing, it's the other side on the right wing, which is interesting, which is again Trippier's side. So that's definitely something we can talk
Commission
about
bias.
for Trippier. But then Brighton, nothing in particular.
Enciso and Gross both.
Both on that side as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
No particular weaknesses in Brighton as such, but from when I watch them, I feel the Estupinan side is the one they could probably get more joy on. because of how forward he gets. And his numbers are interesting, right? His XG numbers, etc., aren't that great. But I remember there were moments, even in the Everton game, he was a center forward. He was the guy making the run on the left side. So, again, potential is always there with Estupinan. Now we look at Brighton's matchup. First one against Arsenal. Arsenal's defense has
Newcastle.
good.
Okay, sorry.
So
Brighton's
Arsenal, right?
matchup,
Yeah. I think they've been pretty good defensively. The new centre back who's come in, he's done a pretty good job. I think he's probably done better than what I expected from Holding. So no any particular weaknesses there, or I can see anything from Newcastle. Anything particular in these matchups you guys have noticed?
Nothing really stands out to me.
He's 4.0 million, by the way. If Saliba's out, Gameweek 38. And if you want to afford a Isak to Jesus, I was looking at something like that in Gameweek 38. Kivior, Trippier to Kivior and Isak to Jesus.
Yeah.
That's also just like blatant memory bias that I have from last season, by the way, because I managed to get Madison and Wilson around this time of the season. And just from memory, there's a certain bias that like guys like Zaha, Wilson, Madison just tend to do well in the final stretch of the season because they're always sort of, not Wilson this time, but they're always sort of in the shop window, etc. as well. You do see a slight output in their improvement in output in their performance.
I've got Man United Wolves up over here. I think Rashford should get some joy in this fixture.
But we are not creating much. Like if people have choices, let's say, and have to bench like Bruno versus Alvarez, for example, and it's a benching decision.
It's a
Like
tough
I'd
one.
say, I mean, it's a tough one. I'd say I'd play Alvarez.
You've gone too negative on us. Come on. LR, we're going to smash them, man. I mean, they lost 6-0 away from home last game.
He just needs to play Rashford, Sancho, and Anthony. Vegas doesn't need to be on the team sheet. Play Marshall if you want, then it's fine. But we look leggy at the moment. We're creating chances, but we're creating half chances. It isn't like clear-cut chances that we used to create at the moment.
I didn't understand playing
And
Bruno on
it's
the
City,
left
right?
wing. Bruno on the left wing last game was crazy. I think you're playing Rashford up top, Vegas number 10, and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And Gary Neville after the game will blame the Glazers for it. It's not the Glazers' fault to play Vegas at number 10.
Yeah.
I mean, we could see Rashford up top in this one, and we could play Sancho and Anthony.
Yeah, that's what I want. I think that's our best front
I
three.
think we will get that.
Yeah, man. It's just while we're there, we just need to pay commiserations to Anthony Marshall because I think he's going to be sold in the summer, and he's just looked a different player post his injury problems this season. He's lost like 3 yards of pace, not like 1 or 2. Like he just doesn't look like the same player he was. So it's been great, Marshall. And sorry, I don't think we're going to see you again.
Bus teams, like and subscribe plug, please.
Pras, why don't you do it for us?
Well, I don't know the whole sentence, but yeah, I mean, look, all I can say is the unrehearsed version is that I don't miss this stream any week. And you guys, basically, the best part is you hit the topics. There is no faffing around. Hit the topics that are the main questions, dilemmas in people's minds. So I absolutely love it. So if you are liking what you're seeing today, then please hit the like button. And as I said again, do subscribe because every week it's a video that I look forward to.
Nice.
So nice.
And Pras, is there a burning question stream coming later today?
No, it'll be on Friday actually. Just work commitments and stuff, and it'll be with your boy Danny. So Danny and I will stream on. We'll do a video on Thursday evening, and it'll be uploaded on Friday afternoon.
Lovely. I look forward to it. I really look forward.
Be fun. Cool.
You can get to burning questions on the Fantasy Football Scout YouTube channel. So make sure you're following them. You're following Pras on Twitter. You really should if you're not.
This is my team first up. Bit of a selection dilemma between Kepa and Edison, but it's going to be pretty much my farewell to Kepa. And I think we can get a result against Forest. Forest were very negative against Brentford. It was a pretty lucky goal. I think we could possibly keep them out with Kante starting. And I feel Kepa has a 10-pointer in him. But Edison, we are looking at again your 2 or 6. So I'm currently on Kepa there. The odds are better for Man City slightly, but I'm expecting some rotation in defense. Maybe Stones to sit out, Laporte to come in, your Rico Lewis, etc. So Kepa, Trippier, Estupinan, Botman. Trent is going to come in. I haven't updated that. Mitoma, March, Salah, Rashford, Bruno, Watkins, and Haaland. Likely 2 free transfers. Likely move Watkins to Isak and March to McAllister. Keep it
Nice.
simple. And like we discussed earlier, the
Sure.
only scenario Wilson comes in if we get confirmation that he's starting and Isak isn't. That's pretty much where my flow chart is. This is your team, Elad?
Yeah. Is that my team? Hold on. I'll quickly just.
I can read it out for you.
Yeah, I've got Kepa,
Yeah.
Botman, Trippier, Estupinan, Trent, Salah, Mitoma, Rashford, Alvarez, Tony, Haaland. My transfer is Tony to a Newcastle striker. I don't know what I'm going to be doing with my. There's a slight chance I move to Enciso and do March to a Newcastle midfielder / Arsenal midfielder that we've spoken about. So let's see how I feel about that come Saturday.
Who do you captain then?
Mitoma.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Pras, do you want me to read it out? Do you have your team up?
No, I've got it. I've got it. So obviously, I play Edison in goal. I will go down with the ship basically until Edison keeps a clean sheet. And I get the argument, by the way. Kepa is very close, but I just feel if Man City keep a clean sheet and Chelsea don't, I won't be surprised. So I'll go with the one that I feel will keep a clean sheet. So
You're doing a stream with Danny, right? On Thursday.
this we're going to talk. I have a slide on goalkeepers. We'll talk about it. So then I think midfield defense is Trent, Trippier, and Botman. I'm on captain Trippier for the reasons that I mentioned. The scenario where I will shift is if Wilson is starting and Isak is not. In that case, I will get Wilson and captain Wilson. But I'm not at the moment not feeling an Isak captaincy. But we will see. Nothing is set in stone. In midfield, I have Bruno, Rashford, Salah, Mitoma, and March. March will become McAllister. I have money for it. And Watkins and Haaland, I can get either Isak or Wilson for Watkins. So I'm benching Estupinan for Trent for the reasons we talked about. I'm not totally convinced of it, but this is just, I mean, it's been there since Sunday. As I said, after Man United lost, I was like, Liverpool have to go for it. So I will go for Trent over Estupinan, but it's close. I'm even thinking if the March injury is a niggle, should I just bench March and play Estupinan this week and have match next week? That is a possibility. And then the last one, the left field one, is basically March and Watkins to Enciso and Joe Linton or Willock or Saint Maximan.
Right.
But that's not me. So that's likely not going to be the case.
Right. I think that's it, Zoph. We've gone on for a very long time, so let's not do the
Yes, I want to
Q&A
watch the
this time. Or do you
cricket
want to
as
do like... Yeah. So CSK 2 wickets down, by the way. Both the openers have gone.
Damn.
Watching this goes on the sideline. That's it, guys. Thank you, as always, Pras, for being with us. Always a pleasure. It wasn't the pod I was expecting it to be, given how much we dive deep into just
Yeah,
Newcastle
the
and
game
Brighton
was fun.
conversation.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Nice, of course. I just want everybody to go through that math in their head on what do they really expect if they see the news.
I'd reckon about at least 50 people who end up watching this will probably sit with a pen and paper and end up doing an exercise after this. If you're doing that, shout out to Pras and, it'd be nice for him to know that you guys just followed that. And we'll see you next week. Is Bakr joining us next week?
I think so. It depends if Pakistan gets the internet restored.
All right. Big man, if you're watching, we're allowed to change our minds. Okay. Good luck, guys. See you next week.
Just as Pakistan
Bye.
changed prime ministers. Let's see.